United States Department of Homeland Security, United States Coast Guard, Transportation of Freight Manual, COMDINST, M461058. Chapter 1. Chapter 1. Freight Trans Freight Transportation Management Policy Responsibility. Purpose of the manual set forth of the Coast Guard Transportation Management Policy procedures economically, efficiently safe movement of the supplies, equipment, and material worldwide. The manual serves as the basis for local transportation operation procedures. The aims of facilitating, assisting, fielding, and unit operations, obtaining the guidance and information regarding transportation services, as well as shipping and receiving the procedures. The manual also identifies prescribed traffic management practices in accordance with the established references and regulations ensured. 1. Consistent compliance with governing regulation standards and procedures used in all Coast Guard activities engaged in the transportation management functions, including shipping and receiving functional activities. The Coast Guard favorable transportation services are obtained with immediate routine mission critical delivery requirements. Appropriate in-transit physical security protection measures are used in the next mission and per requirements. Appropriate assets in the transition visibility. All assets protected with the appropriate transportation service provider. Liability limits will be commercial and transportation service provider pipeline. B. The scope and applicability. Various regulations, public directions of the government with requirements, transportation management, operational procedures. These include domestic and international regulations which govern how the transportation related with the accessible services obtained with the process of the transport of such materials, aid in the navigation system support, shipping aircraft parts, hazardous materials, explosive ordnance, electronic components, general supplies, and equipment. Several regulations and publications governing specific areas of transportation management, purchasing, transportation services used in the Department of Defensive Transportation System, shipping and hazardous material applicable must be used in conjunction with the manual, and adherence with the manual applies to the Coast Guard personnel, military, civilian who are responsible for the transportation management policy at their unit, supervise any of the personnel engaged with the process, outbound, inbound freight shipment, and delegated with the development and implementation of local procedures, shipping and receiving the material equipment required for the use of the Commercial Department of Transportation DTS's or Defense Transportation System assigned to the Coast Guard activities engaged with the shipping and receiving material on the behalf and or the account of the U.S. government. Primary governing regulations, Title 41 CFR Federal Management Regulation Part 102, Title 49 CFR Transportation Hazards Parts 100 through 185, International Air Transportation and Dangerous Goods Regulation Order, General Service Administration Standard Tender Services, DOD 4509, Defensive Transportation Regulation, Part 2 Cargo and Movement, Military Standard 129, Military Marking Website, United States Postal, Domestic and International Mail Manuals website, Coast Guard Air Operational Manuals, reference to the AFMAN, the source of the training requirements of the packaging, shipping, certification, transportation, hazardous cargo, and military effect. Aircraft Air Force Manual, attached A28, is qualifying initial refresher of course that will meet all the certification requirements, and 10. All applicable small package carrier agreements, Air Mobility Command, small package carriers, Airborne Express, DHL Express, Federal Express, United Paracel Express Service. See resource the list, complete reference list, governing bodies. D. Governing bodies, Transportation Management Policy, Field Support, U.S. Coast Guard Commandment, CG 44-1. The GSA, Travel and Transportation Services Military Surface Deployment and Distribution Command, or SDDC, DoD Waterport and Deconus Transportation Management, Air Mobility, AMC, Defensive Transportation System, Air Transportation Service, Military Sealift, or MSC, provided with the specified ocean transport resources and military equipment. Cargo and routing, the detailed guidance, military surface deployment and distribution, SDC, primary resource, the command, Coast Guard shippers seeking qualified commercial transportation service providers for all domestic shipments of the surface deployment distribution. Additionally, with the Surface Deployment Distribution Center supports the ocean cargo transportation. GSA Transportation Travel Office. GSA supports the Coast Guard transportation requirements of the Coast Guard units only unit, but not served by the bill landing on support center website. Identified with the applicable bill landing of the support center for any request regarding identification, billing, standing support center, enters in its contact transportation Freight Program Manager, Air Mobility Command. The command provides military airlift services through the Worldwide Express contracts. The AMC, primary source of the Coast Guard shipper that is seeking the qualified commercial transportation service providers for domestic and international air express. Coast Guard Maintenance Logistics Command, or MLC, for the shipment vessel underway with the contact applicable Maintenance Logistics Command, logistics support. Transportation Officers, Transportation Agency. Transportation Officers, TO, personal designated appointed with the perform the traffic management function of the official activity and is appointed with the installation of the Transportation Officer, Traffic Management Officer, Passenger Transportation Officer, Movement Control Team, Branch Control Team. Transportation Agent, person, military or civilian designated appointed with the Transportation Officer to perform the traffic management functions. Appointment with the Transportation Officer and Transportation Agents. Each organization routinely performing shipping and receiving the function shall appoint the fully qualified person as the transportation officer. If the local situation dictated, one or more qualified personnel, civilian and military, may be appointed by the transportation agent to assist the transportation officer in the performance assigned with the duties. That a letter will be maintained with the file to show the delegation appointed by the transportation officer should have at least a 6-month job experience in shipping and receiving operations, demonstrated knowledge of applicable federal military regulations as referenced in this chapter. Civilian personnel who are designated transportation officer or transportation agency must qualify with the position based on civilian personnel position qualification, job specification standard. The transportation officer appointment mandatory for all billing and landing support centers other than the Coast Guard units designated in the Coast Guard 44-1. See Exhibits 411 for examples of appointment memo. Duties and responsibility of transportation officer and transportation agent. Provide responsive, competent transportation advice and guidance with the Coast Guard and customers within an assigned geographic area. The responsible ensure the compliance with the governing laws and directive regulations. Provide the technical direction, movement, and evaluation of traffic management, accessing the Coast Guard transportation movement program with a worldwide basis. The direction subject to overall guidance policy programs established by the Department of Transportation, the GSA, and the United States Transportation Command, Transcom component with the Surface Deployment Distribution Command, Air Mobility Command, and Military Chief Command. Use applicability routing authority as cited in Chapter 2 for the manual and determining the effective, appropriate, with the cost-efficient shipment of the transportation service provider to meet the shipment requirements. 4. The communication of the transportation service providers regard with the variety with the transportation requirements served with the data communication efficiency relative to the electronic billing manifesting shipping tracking. See Chapter 1, Paragraph H regarding the restriction on the information provided with the discussion and transportation service providers representatives, and monitors the transportation service provider performance to ensure the quality served consistently with the transportation of the Coast Guard assets. Refers to GSA and the STCDC for applicable carrier performance information relative to the carrier pickup, delivery, and service violations of unsafe, poorly maintained equipment to be hazardous material regulation compliance, loss of data, damage shipment, excessive transit time, any other service with performance deficiency. See the DTR Part 2 207 Carrier Performance Program reporting requirements guidelines for shipments of the by STDC negotiated freight leaders. This includes the shipment for processed by the ETA Power Track system for the shipment of the moved on the GSA negotiated tenders report the carrier the performance violation of the GSA Transportation Travel Offices of the San Francisco, California. Ensure the proper accounting of the Coast Guard billing, landing on the issue, the authority of the billing and landing for the Coast Guard shipments shall be made with the commandment of the CG 44-1. See the Chapter 7 for the manual for this guidance. Ensure all required supporting shipment documents manifestly accurately prepared, distributed in accordance with the established procedure using Heron reference regulation publication shipping system using training instructions. Authority certifies necessary in transit shipment diversions of reconsignments and authorized the applicable building and landing correction notice for completed with the route of the appropriate parties with the shipment information modified. See Chapter 7 for the manual. Other guidance. Ensure the shipment of the preparation relative to the packaging, utilization, consolidation, hazardous material marking conforms established government, commercial, and standards. See the resource list. Ensure loading and unloading the transportation service provider equipment conforms to standard practice with the consideration of the system, item, protection, weight, size, limitation, avoid with the transportation service provider equipment and detention demurrage charges. Contains contacts the SDDC to obtain special routing for the volume movements of the shipment for which the non-existing tender of the satisfactory meeting the transportation service requirement. OCONUS units can contact the GSA Transportation Travel Office to obtain the freight routing assistance for the ETA, as either they're not available or unable to support the unit's cargo requirements. Ensure all the freight discrepancy relative to the loss and damage of their service failures reported timely manner to appropriate claim office at the or transportation service provider. See Chapter 7 and 8 for this manual for the guidance. Participate in government cargo recovery effort of the CDTR Part 2 209 website as requested with the complies with the prepares and forward with pertinent transportation information data resource and budget plan and management plan. Serves as a liaison for the Coast Guard headquarters to continuity of the passing changes for the field units in their areas of responsibilities, AORs. Ensure all personnel performing transportation duties attending the appropriate training classes to keep in the freight movement procedures, hazardous material shipments, and etc. H. Transportation officer, transportation agent shall refrain from the discussion relative to the transportation service provider liability, pending freight, and claim actions, except for the authorized directed by the Chapter 8 and 9 of this manual. Never commit to any valuing the shipment activity to the transportation service provider agent prior to the official awarding of the freight per negotiated agreement that does not preclude the discussing anticipated transportation service equipment and requirements, transportation unclassified commodities for the purpose of providing with the interest of the transportation service provider the basis for submitting the bids at the cost favorable rate tenders from government may and may not elect to utilize. Never discuss the Coast Guard activities or missions for that may compromise mission security. 4. Refer to any of the questions concerning how to rely on the transportation service providers' queries and commandment. I. Ethics. Transportation officer and transportation agent shall comply with the government ethics in accordance with the Office of Government Ethics, www.usoge.gov/home at DOD Joint Ethics Regulations, Department of Defense 5507R, Defense Link MIL DOD-GC Defensive Ethics Ethics Regulations regarding acceptance of gratuities for the person and reason to do the business for the Coast Guard, even nominal value of gratitudes from transportation service providers. Agents can often begin unfavorable perception regarding the conflicting information showing favoritism and improper business relationships for any of the government employee who are in a way involved with the selection and procurement of the transportation service. The Freight Routing Authority. Transportation officer and transportation agent shall route the freight in accordance with Chapter 2 of this manual. Movement of the classified CCI sensitive hazardous material. Transportation officer, transportation agent shall route the classified CCI sensitive hazardous material in accordance with Chapter 4 and 5 of this manual. L. The transportation security incident commercial transportation service provider is required to notify the appropriate Department of Transportation authorities of any of the transportation security incidents defining as a security incident resulting from the significant loss of life and environmental damage, transportation system disruption, economic disruption in a particular area, Title 49 U.S. Code 70101, whether the commanding Coast Guard transportation officer received notification to the commercial transportation service provider that the Coast Guard cargo has been involved in such an accident and described above. The transportation officer should report the incident of the SDC C-852-4033-1. The details about the shipment include the transportation service provider standard, the carrier, the alpha code, or the SCAC, the standard carrier alpha code, carrier, the bill lading, and the reference number of the freight transport description shall be provided in the notification. And the transportation security plan. The security plan is required for the shipper's hazardous materials and waste cited in the Title 49 Code of Regulation, Part 172, 800C, the Chapter 4 of the Manual for the information regarding the compliance with requirement. Memorandum. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security, the Coast Guard, the Commanding Officer of the United States Coast Guard, Integrated Support, the 100 Golfway Causeway, Maine Canal, Louisiana, 4615, April 2004. The J.P. Smith, Captain of the Coast Guard, ISC Gulf Area, replied to the intent of the Lieutenant John Doe to Mary Jones and Comptroller, Transportation Officer, Appointment, Transportation Freight Manual, Chapter, Construct M4610.0 10.5 Series of Defensive Transportation Regulations DTR Part 2 Cargo Movement Chapter 201. You are hereby designated Transportation Officer of the Coast Guard area. In accordance with the reference, you will execute the duties in accordance with the reference A and B. Designated effective immediately will remain in effect until your term of employment ended with the designation otherwise canceled or withdrawn. Intentionally left blank, and now we're moving on to Chapter 2.